You know that feeling when you're scrolling through a dozen gaming laptops, trying to picture yourself actually using one, and the whole thing feels like a gamble? You don't want to drop a good chunk of cash on a machine that ends up sitting in the corner because it can't keep up with the games you love, or because it's too heavy to carry to a coffee shop or a friend's house. And yet, the market is full of big brand hype that makes it hard to separate the real value from the marketing fluff. That's why I'm breaking down the MSI Cyborg 15, a fine and light laptop that promises high-FPS gaming without the bulk of a desktop replacement. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about who this laptop actually serves. If you're the type of gamer who likes to hop between a dorm room, a small apartment, and a weekend gaming session at a friend's place, the Cyborg's 15.6-inch chassis and relatively low weight are genuine advantages. It's not a 17-inch beast that you have to lug around. It fits easily into a standard backpack and still manages to house a dedicated RTX 5060 GPU. That means you can fire up titles like Valorant, Fortnite, or even more demanding games like Cyberpunk 2077 at respectable frame rates, provided you're okay with adjusting settings a notch or two. The 144Hz eyepiece level panel adds smoothness that you can actually feel when you're strafing around a map or pulling off quick aim adjustments, something you notice more than just on paper. Now, if you're the sort of player who lives for ultra-high settings, ray tracing on at maximum, and never compromises on visual fidelity, the RTX 5060 will feel a bit like a stepping stone rather than a final destination. It's solid for 1080p, but you'll start hitting the wall if you push it to max out textures in the latest AAA releases. That's not a flaw so much as a trade-off built into the fine and light design. The GPU's power draw and heat output are kept in check by the slimmer chassis, which means you won't get the same raw horsepower you'd find in a bulkier 15-inch laptop with an RTX 3070. In plain terms, you'll get smooth, playable performance, but you might have to dial down a few eye candy options if you want consistent 60 frames per second in the most demanding scenes. The processor side of the equation is an Intel Core i5210H paired with DDR5 5600 memory. For everyday task streaming, video editing, running a few background tabs while you game, this combo feels snappy enough. I've actually used the laptop for a few weeks of remote school work and casual video calls, and the multitasking experience didn't feel like a bottleneck. The DDR5 speed helps keep load times short, which you'll notice when launching games or opening large projects. That said, the i5210H isn't a top-tier chip. It sits a step below the i7 or i9 options you see in higher-priced gaming rigs. If you plan to do heavy rendering, large-scale simulations, or want future-proofing for upcoming CPU-intensive titles, you might outgrow it sooner than you'd like. Storage is a 512GB NVMe SSD. That's plenty for the operating system, a handful of games, and a decent amount of media. The speed is fast enough that you'll hardly wait when loading into a new level, and the SSD helps keep the laptop's overall weight low. But if you're a collector who wants to keep a library of 20+ AAA games installed at once, you'll need to factor in an external drive or upgrade the internal storage later. The good news is MSI typically offers a second M.2 slot, so you can add another SSD without opening the case too much, but that's an extra cost you should anticipate. Connectivity is where the Cyborg really shines for on-the-go gamers. Wi-Fi 6E means lower latency and better performance in crowded networks, something you'll notice if you're gaming in an apartment complex with many neighbors on the same band. The full I/O selection includes a USB-C port with Thunderbolt support, 3 USB-A ports, an HDMI 2.1 output, and a headphone/mic combo jack. That layout lets you plug in a headset, an external monitor, and a mouse all at once without needing a dongle. In practice, I've been able to dock the laptop at a small home setup, run a 144Hz external display, and still have the built-in screen as a secondary view for chat or system monitoring. One practical downside that pops up once you start using the machine for longer sessions is the thermal management. Because the chassis is thin, the fans have to work harder to keep the GPU and CPU temperatures in check. In a typical 90-minute gaming marathon, the fans become audible, nothing scary, but they're definitely noticeable. The laptop can get warm to the touch on the palm rest, which is something to keep in mind if you prefer a cooler typing experience. Some users mitigate this by using a small cooling pad, but that adds another accessory to the mix. Battery life is another realistic factor. With the RTX 5060,